Here come the men in black.
I don't own any white shirts. This'll have to do. I went into Men in Black International thinking, why is no one talking about this movie? It's a big studio summer blockbuster. It's a franchise that's been popular in the past. There's a lot of talent attached to it. You got Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson fresh off Avengers Endgame, and they were awesome together in Thor Ragnarok, and yet there seems to be no buzz about this movie at all. Sure, the trailers were underwhelming, but you'd think some people would be talking about it at least. But no, it's really gone under the radar. And now I know why. If there's two words that sum up Men in Black International, it's wasted potential. This movie had a very capable director, a great cast with two leads who are still hot from their roles in, at the time I'm recording this, the second biggest movie of all time, and they had, 7 years since the last Men in Black movie to crank out a good script? And this is what they came up with. I hate to say it, but this movie really felt like a cash grab, because there's a lot of money on the screen, but very little actual effort on the part of the studio, the writers, or the filmmakers. Not the cast, though. The cast is one of the few redeeming qualities about this project. Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson are both very charismatic, very charming, and they have a lot of chemistry together, which they proved in Thor Ragnarok, which is undoubtedly how they landed this gig, because someone at the studio wanted to recapture the chemistry they had in that movie. But that turns out to be a double-edged sword, because supposedly there was a lot of improving in Thor Ragnarok, and I guess someone behind the scenes on this movie thought they could just do the same thing here to cover up for the fact that they barely had a script. And I use the word script loosely because this movie feels less like one big story and more like a collection of different ideas and set pieces just sort of cobbled together. They go to one location and they do a thing. Then they go to another location and they do another thing. Then they go to another location and they do a different thing. Then they go back to the original location and so on and so on. And it's all pretty loosely tied together by a story that never really gels or even gets out of first gear. And a lot of that time is spent with Hemsworth and Thompson just kind of riffing off each other. And they're charming enough for that to work for a little while, but as the movie goes on, you start to notice that nothing is necessarily wrong with their timing or their delivery, but the jokes are just not landing. Probably because the screenwriters didn't bother to write any. The original Men in Black film had a really tight script with a clever, poignant story and lots of legitimately funny jokes. This doesn't have any of that, despite the best efforts of the cast. They're trying, but they can't improve what isn't on the page. It kind of reminded me a little of Ghostbusters 2016 in that way, which is ironic because there's a moment in the climax that seems to have been lifted directly from that movie. Now, thankfully, Men in Black International is nowhere near the disaster Ghostbusters 2016 was, but it has a lot of similar problems, nearly all of them script-related. In my opinion, the biggest issue with the script is the lack of creativity. There are so many opportunities here to do some really fun, kooky, creative things that the movie just passes on, and instead does things that are completely unimaginative and generic and kind of lazy. For example, there's this one scene where Agent H and Agent M are in this firefight with two aliens. These aliens have the ability to, control all the matter around them and turn solids into liquids and reshape them and use them as weapons and stuff, which presents all kinds of possibilities for action sequences, but all they really use it for most of the time is just to throw things. Then you've got the two agents who are shooting their guns, but the guns aren't stopping the aliens. So what do? They go to the car and they pull out some bigger guns. But those guns aren't powerful enough either, so they go back to the car and they pull out even bigger guns, and it just goes on like that. The whole action scene is just them standing in one place, shooting at these aliens, and then grabbing progressively bigger guns when those don't work. I guess the joke is that the car has guns stored in lots of weird places, but if that's the joke, I don't see how that's funny. No one in my theater laughed at it. Later on, there's this chase scene that they showed in the trailer, where H and M are on this flying motorbike and they're zooming through the streets of Marrakesh trying to outrun some people, but they're also exposing themselves to all the civilians on the street while they do this, so they have to neuralize all these people while they're trying to outrun these dudes chasing them. Think of all the stuff you can do with this situation. And I tell you to do it because the filmmakers sure didn't, and the neuralizing everyone thing barely factors into it. They just stop the bike, flash everyone in the eye real quick, and zoom off again easy peasy. It's like, well, why even bother introducing that as an obstacle if you're not going to do anything with it? Later in the movie, there's a fight scene between Agent H and this big, brutish alien. So I thought there was going to be some twist here where it looks like this huge powerhouse, but it actually fights in a completely different, freaky, bizarre way, contrary to how it looks, because, you know, it's an alien, and that would be interesting and fun. But no, it's just Chris Hemsworth versus a big, strong dude who might as well have been a human for all the difference it made. Even the MacGuffin that drives the plot isn't anything special or unique. It's basically just another more powerful gun. Complete lack of creativity, made worse by the fact that the movie doesn't even have good fundamentals of story and character to fall back on. You'll be able to guess the big twist about halfway through the movie, if not sooner, and the writers really do a disservice to Tessa Thompson, who's essentially the main character, but her story is probably the worst handled out of anybody's. The story is, she witnessed the Men in Black neuralizing her parents as a kid. So she becomes obsessed and dedicates her whole life to finding the Men in Black and joining them, but once she's done that about 20 minutes in, her arc just kinda stops. And the rest of the movie isn't even really about that anymore. It doesn't factor into the story or inform any decisions she makes later on. Frankly, her whole origin of joining the Men in Black could have been cut out of the movie altogether without losing a thing. Just a couple tweaks to the dialogue here and there and you wouldn't even miss it. For a movie that took 7 years since the last one to put out, this actually comes off as very rushed, as if the studio was trying to meet a deadline, so they took a bunch of shortcuts instead of taking time to craft a better script and figured they could get around that by throwing tons of CG at the screen and doing a lot of improv on set. But all that does is make the movie a hollow viewing experience. None of the Men in Black sequels have been all that great, but this one just feels phoned in. Any enjoyment you get from Men in Black International is going to come from the admittedly great and likable cast, who are doing their damnedest to make something out of this, but the movie doesn't give them much to work with, and they just seem like they're spinning their wheels a lot of the time. If you're a fan of the Men in Black franchise, this might be worth a matinee if you've got nothing else to do. It's not terrible or insulting like Ghostbusters 2016 was. Mostly, it's just forgettable. If you enjoyed this review, please leave a comment down below. Also, smash that bell icon and follow me on Twitter using the link in the description box so you'll always be notified when new videos get uploaded. And don't forget to give it a like, share, and subscribe to support the channel because the YouTube algorithm is unrelenting and it just keeps coming. Ah, so you're back to kill this video too, huh? Yeah, we'll see about that. I left my neuralizer in the car. And my Series 4 deatomizer. God damn it! Nothing? Really? Like, share, subscribe.